Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Shri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Shri and Peter.
Welcome everyone to this episode of the CPG Guys featuring Peter Bond and Shri. And this week, we're going to dive into more brand conversation, digital e-commerce, and we actually do it with a brick and mortar native like me who is transformed into e-commerce. But before we get there, first, I'd like to thank all our listeners and all our followers for the love you've shown us. We've crossed 3,500 downloads, closer to 4,000. We're averaging pretty neat amount of downloads per episode. And you have also told us that you want us to focus more on profitability and the econometrics of e-commerce. So coming soon, Peter and I will put out a 5-part series beginning October 2nd, Friday, on the details of e-commerce and profitability, all the way from supply chain down to my favorite topic, media above the line, below the line, as well as what a pro forma P&L could possibly look like. And if you want to follow us, a reminder, CPGGuys.com, that's CPGGUYS.com. You can find all our content there. And if you scroll up and down, you'll find our podcasting platform as well as our Instagram. And while you're there, we'd love for you to go to our Apple CPG podcast and rate and review us. And you can also find us another way to do that, which is tinyurl.com/Apple CPG podcast. So without further ado, welcome to my co-host, the legend of CRM, the legend of loyalty, and the data captain himself, who is now the e-commerce expert too, Mr. Peter Bond.
Shri, you are the Hamilton to my Burr, the Soch to my Greaser, the Butch Cassidy to my Sundance Kid. Best part of the week is doing this with you. Good to see you again.
And the best part of each one of these podcasts is listening to Peter's entire list of the Aaron Burr to my Hamilton and the 4,000 others he has personally coined. To take note, please. So I want to welcome our guest, who's a personal friend of mine, and I've known him a long time in the industry. Like I mentioned, a CPG veteran who has transformed from being a brick and mortar, very similar to my own personal journey. He's the VP of e-commerce and digital retail at Accelerata, and a standalone division of Accelerata called Bimbo Bakeries. And in that journey, he has responsibilities for e-commerce and digital sales. And I will actually ask Omar to tell us more about this role in the wonderful world of baking goods, breads, etc., and how that e-commerce world is running. And Omar, tell the audience what you do.
Great. Thank you, Shri. Thank you, Peter. So I work for Bimbo Bakeries USA, which is part of Grupo Bimbo. And Grupo Bimbo is the world's biggest baking goods manufacturer. We have iconic brands like Entenmann, Sara Lee, Arnold's Bread, and so on and so forth. And we are the only national with all 50 states of the U.S. where we sell our products. And a pure play baking company. And we focus on that. We specialize on that. My role is basically leading our e-commerce that encompasses sales, marketing, and also supply chain, and including both for pure plays and for our brick and mortar customers online as well. So across all our categories. So very exciting space to be. Online grocery is definitely something which is exploding, as you guys probably know. So happy to be here.
Welcome aboard, Omar. So let's jump right into it. The first thing that comes to my mind is, you and I, Peter, we've all spent 20 plus years in the CPG industry, or close to 20 plus years in this industry. And if you think about various categories, the ones that immediately come to your mind for digital retail, aka e-commerce, are hardlines, electronics, and then the world of very fast moving but shelf stable consumer goods, etc. The world you're in is obviously baking and food, which tends to be more refrigerated, frozen, things of that nature. So when I think about fresh food, what are the notable differences that one should plan to think of and be sure they're ready to enter the e-commerce world, given that the shelf life isn't these long 30 days plus that hardlines and other fast-moving food and beverage tend to have?
Yeah, I think one of the main differences is consumption. From coming from a previous background at Colgate, Palmolive, where I was working, people don't consume toothpaste they don't need to go buy toothpaste every week, right? But with our staple products like our bread, people are buying that once or twice a week, and it is a destination driver. People have that on the list. They're going to the store and looking for that, and similarly, they're going online looking for that. In my world, also it's a lot of our products, not a huge amount, but are based on basically impulse buying. Toothpaste is not impulse. You don't feel like you're sitting watching something. I need to brush my teeth. Let me buy that. But with our sweet baked goods and some other products, there is. So, and as you know, that impulse is a little tricky online because obviously there is a delay when you get the product, which that window is closing. But that's something different than what you see in hard lines. The third thing I would say is about supply chain. Our supply chain, because it's a short shelf life product, our supply chain is different. We are primarily a DSD, a direct store delivery model. We do have a warehouse model as well. And for e-commerce, especially for pure plays, it's more on the warehouse model, or we're shipping it one way. But again, that makes it challenging and also fun on how to navigate these waters of supply chain and consumer consumption habits.
Omar, welcome to the podcast. We're very grateful to have you join us. My mother lives north of the border in Canada, and as soon as the border opens, the first thing she'll ask me to do is bring her granddaughter up to meet her. The second thing she'll do is ask me while I'm doing that to load a suitcase full of Thomas's English muffins and bring them to make her happy. So we're big fans of your product. Thank you for your information on the differences and the complexities of perishable items in home delivery. It's never been as easy as Shri had indicated some of the more durable products are. But this pandemic has certainly made it much more challenging from a supply chain perspective. What is going on from your perspective in making sure that even in this pandemic era, that fresh products, perishable products are being delivered as effectively as possible through your supply chain partners?
Sure. When the pandemic, hit its peak, we were ready. So we basically went to all our retailers and we had the most key SKUs we were able to share with them. Listen, we will keep on producing them, and some of the ones which are more long tail, we focused away from them just so we can focus on the right products for our consumers. I'd say the overall the way we get the product to the market before or overall it used to be a demand side issue where the consumers were still going to the store to pick it up, but when COVID hit, it became more of a supply side, meaning the demand was exploding, but our retail partners obviously has labor shortages, right? And understandably so. People were getting sick; they couldn't get the labor in the right amount they needed. So, but obviously since then, we've hopefully the peak is behind us. We've been able to have a good balance between demand and supply, and because of that, many habits have formed. What we're seeing is that while it's not as high as peak COVID, as it was at peak COVID, but it's still, they say within 30 to 45 days, habits are formed, and more people are now not switching and going back to the store. They are still buying online, which is great for my business and overall. But obviously, COVID is not something that we had ever hoped for, but something which probably would have taken Peter 2 or 3 years to get there. We were able to get there in like a few months.
So, Omar, as I hear you talk about, what's going on and the fact that the business model is vastly transformed for you folks in the last 6 odd months, another thing that came to my mind is, again, when I think of food and beverage, people, Peter talked about his mom wanting Thomas English muffins. We've been eating that, I don't remember how long, forever, right? And people have extreme brand loyalty down to the SKU level. I would call it unit SKU level brand loyalty. So in that world, traditionally, when I think of digital retail and sales, and I think you and I have been to many conferences together, Omar, where we've talked about digital capabilities. At some point, you've led digital capabilities. You're leading digital capabilities today. I think of it as like search, content, assortment, the all-important ratings and reviews. But in this world of fresh food, if brand loyalty is a big part of how consumers choose, earlier you also referred to search. They're searching for products online. Is SEM the only way to go for capabilities? Do ratings and reviews matter? Do people look at it? Does content matter? Is this a surround sound activity, or you really focus just on let's make sure we get our SEM strategy right?
What I'm surprised is that ratings and reviews are online grocery are not as prevalent. I know, Peter, you won't like to hear that, but many of our retailer websites, they don't have that capability, right? They're slowly developing that. For example, I believe in Kroger online, you can't do reviews yet. In Walmart, on the online grocery site, they're not there yet, but they're not as prevalent.
Yeah.
But search is something which we are doubling down on. While it's true that in the full basket model, the shopper is going to the favorites, to the past purchases, and adding a lot of those items to the cart, but they're still searching. They're still searching for the deals. They're still searching for the brands they're looking for, right? If they couldn't find it last time. So I've seen that some of our best performance has been in the search ROAS. And that is something we are really focused on and one of my top priorities.
I had a follow-up. I heard you mention the dirty word or the much maligned word, or one of my favorites, which is ROAS. Right. So the general assumption in the industry is if a ROAS is working, it should be 3 or higher. Do you have an opinion on that to share?
Yes. Obviously, it's different by retailer. We've seen some retailer ROAS in search to be much stronger in the double-digit percentage points as well. But definitely, anything I would say 3 and 4, and anything above that is should be the goal.
And Omar, really, so the question I want to just kind of append to that before I turn it back to Peter, who's itching to ask you the next one, is if ROAS becomes the ecosystem of a very important metric for retailer media or retail media, then we get into arguments in the industry. Does it belong below the line or does it belong above the line? Because it tends to become more of a shopper marketing activity, very much like digital, very much like in-store displays, and not a part of the media mix. Isn't that an issue versus impressions, which should really be the metric?
Yeah, and that debate is still going on across the board in not only here, but also in my previous employer and my peer companies, right? So the way I look at it, if it's something is driving conversion, right? And if it's something in the purchase funnel, if it's built, it's where it's not awareness, but driving conversion, logically, it should be something similar to shopper or trade, right? Because listen, it's driving that. But then there is obviously top of the funnel, which is more awareness, more media kind of investments. But there is in e-commerce, there is that gray line, right? And there are different schools of thought where one fits in. A gray line is a banner ad which has a buy now. Is that driving conversion? It's more awareness building. So I think the jury is still out. But I think how I look at it is that number one, the retailer doesn't care; they want the funding. And secondly, what matters is basically if you can drive the sales, if you can drive your top line, and where you put it becomes a secondary issue, really.
Back to your comment on ratings and reviews and retailers not having that functionality on their sites. I can say this. I think as retailers start to understand the reality that ratings and reviews directly benefits one brand that they carry more than any other, and it's their own private label brand because it directly addresses the issue of quality, they'll start to embrace it a lot more. On what your company's done, I often use your business model and what you've been doing with your e-commerce partners as a best practice. And the example that I'm bringing up is if anyone goes to a Walmart PDP or even the Amazon PDP, you will see in the image carousel, probably the 5th or 6th image is a 5-star rated verbatim from a review. What you're doing is you're building trust and authenticity, and you're not letting the fact that a retailer does or does not have a syndicated system of UGC to stop you from getting that content onto their page. And it's also know that while I know from my experience at Power Reviews, we like to think that ratings and reviews are the most important part of the experience. Our research shows that actually the image carousel is the most important part of the PDP. So kudos to you for doing that.
Great.
So now to my question. Sorry, long-winded. Looking at your background, you've touched a lot of categories in e-commerce. You've had some global roles. So two-part question. From the standpoint of which do you think is harder to do in e-commerce, strategy or execution? And how is it different working in a global role versus a role where you actually own the P&L on a particular market?
Great. I was hoping you'd ask this question because it's something I get asked often. I do think about this as well. So first, let me talk about our categories. Right, that's important. I've been lucky enough to work in companies where our brands are number one or number two in the categories we play in. And I sort of fall in love with those brands, right? And I have to have skin in the game. And I think my wife and kids hate that because if I only get those brands for that category, right? I'm like, listen, no pun intended, but this is bringing the dough. So we need to, be getting Arnold bread and not our competitors and bread. Although Arnold is still better tasting as well. But again, so I wanted to just, put that out. And coming to a global versus P&L, a global role, I've been in a global role in the past, and it has a certain charm, and we romanticize the traveling. And, I love, getting on a plane, going to Asia, going to LATAM and Europe. And to me, it was a humbling experience because here we're in North America, either across the border or here we live in a bubble where we think we are probably doing the best in this thing or are ahead of the curve. But when you go to Asia, especially in digital and e-commerce, you see they're light years ahead. And you learn a lot. You come back and then you can join the dots and can teach other markets, listen, the world has already moved in Asia. This is what we need to do. So it's a humbling experience. It's a learning experience. And it's definitely something where you can grow up really fast. And I love doing that when I was at Colgate. On the P&L side, the P&L keeps you sharp. Managing your P&L, you think a little differently. You are driving growth. You're driving business. And where I am in my career, I love managing the P&L. As I say, the closer you are to the money, you are respected more, or you are looked at to find the next big challenge. So, where I am, I love it. I love the global part as well. When I was there, this is where I want to be right now. And maybe when I'm closer to retirement, I love to go travel the world and take pictures with babies and celebrities and go back to a global role. But where I'm right now, I think the P&L keeps you on the edge, and it's definitely something which is I would recommend people who are coming new to the industry start with that, and then you can go over to a more global role.
Speaking of follow the money, so let's just take a deeper dive into that P&L ecosystem, right? Are you able to share what kind of growth you're seeing in the fast-moving food, especially fresh food areas such as baking goods, etc., during the last 6 months or so? And then when you think about the growth that you're seeing for the balance of year, does it change anything, like an approach, a strategy perhaps, or how you do your strat plan or your AOP for, and for those listening, AOP is annual operating plan, aka the follow the money, connecting it to the strat plan. Are you changing anything for 2021? And then is there any relevance during the holiday season given Thanksgiving to New Year in this category?
Sure. So coming back to the first part of your question, so what kind of growth we've seen? What I can say is, what I can share is that we've seen double-digit growth, high double-digit, and some retailers who weren't growing before, we've seen even triple-digit percentage point growth, which is huge, right? We're growing faster than the category and faster than I think overall the retailers. So very pleased with that. What makes it tricky is as we think about 2021, it's like the expectations are now, okay, so we did this now. 2021 should be an increase from there. So I think we have to manage it. I'm trying to manage it very carefully. I don't think it will be. I hope, part of this was because of COVID. And I sincerely hope that COVID declines and we find the vaccine and so on and so forth. I don't think we'll go back to the base 2020 before COVID, but it will be much higher than what we had anticipated when we did our 3-year plan in 2019, for example, right?
So there's a new base, basically.
New base. The paradigms have shifted. The other part of your question was the holiday season. For our categories, it depends. On sweet baked goods, yes, their sales usually go up during people are entertaining more and buying sweet baked goods and cakes and so on. For our staples like bread, people are traveling more, so actually it doesn't really affect that, right? It doesn't increase, there's no gifting of bread per se. So I don't see it, but we still are, as I said earlier on, some habits have formed, so people are still buying online. So we're seeing that trend, and that I see that continuing.
Omar, let me tackle 2021 in a different way. You said there's a new baseline. I've also learned, having been in the retail CPG space for 25 years, that no good deed goes unpunished the following year. So you mentioned new baseline. How do you even think about setting what that is and then building expectations that are achievable, given that, to your point, we don't know when this pandemic is going to be addressed and how we can get back to a more predictable life? What are you doing to safeguard the plan to make sure that it's still achievable, but it's not overly unrealistic?
So we're using so the way we are triangulating our data is from a few sources. One is from a customer retailer level, bottoms up. So we had the base, then we did the latest estimate, the LE, we did the latest estimate again, and then seeing what we can expect for 2021 based on that. So it's not that we will take the LE and then just multiply it by a certain factor that we would have traditionally done. So it's not that. Then we're also taking it from an overall category penetration point, right? So for example, what that means is if overall grocery is 6% and next year could be like 8%, right? So taking a look, if it was 8%, and let's look at how we came up with our customer level, retail level growth, and see where we end up and seeing if those make sense. And then lastly, seeing, if we were to project a few years ahead and based on what we're seeing in the industry and trying to figure that out as well. There's so many reports going on right now. Some have, online grocery is 30-40% to stay, right? So I look at those and I hope that the senior leadership is not just going by that number alone. So we really need to be careful on how to set expectations which are realistic. And for the most part, I think we have been realistic. And I tell everyone in my leadership team to take a look at the top line number, right? If sometimes you look at retailer level, they'll see a growth which is very modest, but then some retailers are really going and exploding. So you have to take as a holistic number and then triangulate from different sources to come up something which you can make in your plan without getting blamed for sandbagging.
So, Mar, that's a good message, generally one that I kind of put out in the industry all the time. That is, reading an article doesn't equal to creating a strategy, and it doesn't become the sole source of input for a strategy or anchoring a strategy to an article for that matter. But what it does serve is asking the right questions. So articles are good for people to read and ask the right questions. But speaking of strategy, I want to jump to D2C or B2B. Again, fast-moving, fresh, baked goods. Does D2C, B2B even make sense? And if so, the first thing that comes to mind, obviously outside of the capabilities we've discussed, like the digital shelf, etc., multi-packs, special packs, it's really a play on assortment. So are you all really in that space? Would you recommend it or, give advice in terms of in fresh and fast food, should one be entering the D2C space given fulfillment will be the single sole barrier or obstacle to overcome?
Yeah, DTC for brands is something which is not new. Sure, you know that, right? So, but before anyone starts that journey, I, urge them to take a look at why they're doing that, what the KPIs are. If it's just a pure revenue play, don't do that. to me, it's more than that. It's a connection to the consumer, right? We need to have that connection. It's about convenience to the consumer. When for example, PepsiCo launched, snacks.com and pantryshop.com. And I think their timing was right, honestly, because the consumer is now sitting at home because of COVID. They're looking to get the product. They don't want to go outside, and they're looking for some sort of curated bundles and so on. So I think if you take those into aspect and start a D2C, I think it's the right time to do that. But you have to be really fulfilling or providing some sort of utility to a consumer. That's number one. And you raised a point about the assortment. I totally agree with you. The assortment needs to work. The price pack architecture needs to work. It's not cheap to ship something across the country, right? That is the biggest single cost. So you have to, when you look at the price pack architecture, you need to keep the consumer in the front. Is the assortment you're providing, is it the right for the consumer? Is the variety pack you're providing, are they looking for that? Is the price point the right price point for them, right? So if you can answer all of these things, and yes, I think we should be looking at having those either D2C or e-commerce only or assortments. So I think that's if you have to have the right value prop for the consumer, you have to have the consumer in the middle of all of this.
Yeah, I think the D2C consumer pack is also a great opportunity for you to get first-party data from your consumers. And, I'm all about generating content. That's a tremendous opportunity for you to solicit that feedback, which you can then repurpose for driving more paths to purchase. So 4 years ago, I think about when I was on the retail side, I remember being in a merchandising director's office about an hour before the AOP was going to the president of the division. And it dawned on him that he didn't have the part of the AOP that was for the e-commerce group. So he called up the person and said, hey, can you email me over whatever pages you have and I'll throw it in the appendix. So I'm hoping that in this world that's changed. The world of QBRs and joint business plans with retailers has evolved, where e-commerce is, if it, at least before the pandemic, certainly after the pandemic, it is front and center. We know that Target and Walmart have actually merged the merchandising decisions for both digital and physical, and I think that's a good thing. Where does your energy go for growing your business and doing these kinds of activities? And how do you learn from that, and how do you leverage that, given that data in e-commerce it's either scarce or it's blended, like IRI? Think about Instacart, right? Instacart, they go and shop at grocery stores, and then that purchase gets blended into that grocery store's IRA data. So how do you make sense of that with limited data?
Sure. So first part, you mentioned about JBPs and QBRs. I think those are extremely important because we will grow with our retail partners, right? And we intend to grow with them. And whenever I go to a QBR or JBP, I like to listen more than talk. So so I can listen in on to see how we can help our retail partners. On the data scarcity, yes, while the retailers have a ton of data, what I've seen is those who share data and lean in more, we lean in more with them and help drive the category, help drive the growth. And we've been online category captains for some of our key retail partners. And we are providing this information. So we want to, as a rising tide lifts all boats, we want to lift them. We want to lift the category. And being the biggest brand, obviously, it helps us. So not all retailers share data, but what I can say is those who do are in the best position for us to help them and grow.
Speaking of sharing data, media, which is, we talked a little bit about CPM earlier. Peter mentioned it. You talked to ROAS, and then I asked some questions about impressions, etc. But the general word in the industry, and through my own personal experiences touching many brands, dealing with various customers, retailers, call them what you may, the world of retail media, I've never felt the level of data sharing that is required for this to be a partnership where you can truly hold hands and build the consumer base in the right fashion exists even today.
Right.
Do you have any learnings you can share with us? And not all platforms are made the same either. And if you look at it today, no longer is it AMG and the media mix. It's AMG, it's Roundel, it's WMG, it's Kroger, it's Instacart. There's even Triad making a comeback in a different way with their acquisition. What's your approach to handling retail media? Because you have, and I gave you such a small list. When I think of food, it's mind-boggling the number of super regionals and the number of food grocers you deal with, probably north of 25. How do you handle media? And then let's try to land that answer again, above the line, below the line.
Sure. So media has a place. Media is important, and it's good for awareness building. But like I said, before on the data part, if I don't know what my ROI is or my ROAS is on what I'm investing, I'll be reluctant to invest the right level, maybe what they're expecting, right? So I will definitely, see where it makes sense. But I want to focus on something where I can measure the results. I want something where I can see the biggest bang for the buck. And if I'm just giving them the bucks and not see the bang, or I can't measure the bang, then obviously it's going to be a tough sell internally for me, and tough to give money to my retail partners. So what I would say is that as long as I can measure the results, and I can measure, for example, in search, I can measure that, right? I can turn it off, I can turn it on, and I have that control. So I want control, and I want to see what that growth is, even if I don't have control. To give you an example, if I have $1 to spend, I'll spend at least 80 cents on these things which are driving conversion, and 20 cents on which are driving awareness. How I look at it, and then you can see, and that one, the 20%.
Great advice.
I will keep on below the line, and the 80 I will keep above the line.
Sri, what I heard Omar saying is that it's less about the above the line and below the line, and more about the measurement, so that he can understand whether he's getting a good return on how he's spending his money. And then for the smaller part of the bucket, it's about building the awareness. And so again, it's interesting because we recently spoke with Instacart, and I think their model offers something very different than most of the others, in that it's not a specific retailer. They have so many in their marketplace, and so they offer a unique opportunity to not get bogged down in brands where the above the line and below the line seems to really matter more than anything. So my last question to you is, if you're looking to ramp up your e-commerce business, if you haven't already done it during the pandemic, I think you're missing the boat. But what are some of the building blocks you would say to brands that are now realizing I got to do something, that they need to address, block and tackle to get into this?
Sure. The first advice I would give is, and I think the most important advice is, win with the winners. Meaning, not all brands have the right to win online of your brands. Not all retailers have the right to win. There are different nuances. Different retailers are doing. Some are doing delivery. Some are doing using Instacart. Some are purely using automated shipment and warehouses. Right. There's so many different. The bets are all over the place. So I would say that you also, as a brand, choose where you want to bet. Go and double down on that. But remember, again, win with the winners. That everything has the right to win. And so if you have a limited amount of money, which we all do, focus on the horses, bet against those horses you think are going to win. And obviously, things are moving. You see a new shiny toy, so to speak, every day in the space. And you need to manage. Right, exactly. You need to manage that with your senior management, right? Like I said, an article, people read and get excited. But again, when you basically peel the onion, so to speak, hopefully that doesn't make you cry. That makes you see that this is something that is sustainable for the future. So investment levels should be sustainable also for the future. And honestly, Peter and Shri, this is online grocery, is one of the most exciting spaces to be right now. And the way I ended up here, is to be the right place at the right time. It's not through any brilliance on my part, really. It was something which, is, I would say, fate or kismet.
Well, Omar, Shri and I feel that same excitement, which is why we wanted you here today, and we're very grateful for all of the counsel, advice, and information you've provided to us.
Mr. Humble says, right place, right time, and that's a very important word here we'll close this episode with. If you're in the business of fast-moving consumer goods, this is the right place, right time. I think we can all conclude to be in e-commerce. I personally will tell you, and I think we share that view between the three of us, that you don't have much of a choice. How you do it is you do it responsibly. One such example I want to leave as a parting thought on this episode is, in the industry, we obsess over above the line and below the line, and we have for a few years. It all comes down to who's going to pay for the actual bill for media. And Omar's advice here is pretty simple and straightforward. The consumer and customer don't care, and you need to execute. And you can figure out how to allocate it internally yourself, and it should not be a major conversation we obsess over in the industry. So thank you for that. As we wrap up this episode, I want to remind all our listeners and viewers, you can catch all of our content on CPGGUYS.com. While you're there, I would really appreciate it. And Peter and I would thank you if you take a moment to download and listen to this podcast on Apple, which is tinyurl.com/Apple CPG podcast, or simply click on the link when you go to CPGGuys.com on the podcast platforms link. And we love the fact and are really appreciative of the fact that you have now shown us the love, and we are close to 1,000 organic followers on LinkedIn. And I want to thank Omar for the generosity of your time today and anchoring us on a fast-moving consumer goods category, which is not easy to follow along on e-commerce and digital retail. We hope you'll come back in the new year as the year closes, and we can have a conversation about how 2020 went, how it started, what you were expecting, and where you closed the year out, and is it really setting you up for 2021? Peter, as always, thank you for this amazing partnership and enriching our conversations and being part of the CPG Guys.
Shri, this is a great journey. Glad to be on it. Another tremendous episode, Omar. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Omar. And with that, we will close this one out.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.